Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm reacting to Does Free Will Really Exist? Scientific and Vedantic Views. I thought I said that wrong, Vedantic, because I heard another word. Anyways, now this is a very interesting question. Before reacting to before I started this YouTube channel, I did watch some arguments for and against free will. And my belief after watching those videos is somewhere in the middle. We do have instinctual natures to do certain things, but that doesn't always mean that we must do them. We have the ability to resist our instinctual nature. And so again, the example that I've used before was the fact that if there's a boiling hot water and you grab it and you lift it up and you realize it's really hot, you drop it without really thinking about it necessarily. You know it's hot and you instinctively drop it. But at the same time, when you grab that and then you move it out again, then you realize there's someone underneath there, a dog, your child, or a friend, or whatever. You don't necessarily just drop it right on top of them. Usually, you tend to try to push it away or sling it away from where it can harm someone. So that's our instinct to drop it, but our will to resist to drop it and move it away when there's someone underneath. But when we are aware of our surroundings, we instinctively drop it. But anyways, let's see what this Swami has to say about that.
Recently, I got an interesting question from Sridhar in Peoria, Illinois. He asks, "Do I have free will to do what I want to do?" Sridhar's question was debated in Greece and India thousands of years ago, and it's still a hot topic today. He continues, "Since what is happening around us is all God's will, anything I do could be interpreted as God's will."
Now, with that being said, understanding Advaita Vedanta from my understanding is the fact that you are God. I is God. You are consciousness, you are pure consciousness, everything is consciousness. Therefore, you say God will, you're just one step away from eventually getting to the truth, which is I, the God. I as God. I as everything.
Here, Sridhar suggests that we're all like puppets, and God is the master puppeteer, pulling the strings that control our behavior. But this leads to another perplexing issue. If everything I do is controlled by God, then if I commit a terrible crime, it's God's fault. Don't blame me. Obviously, there's something drastically wrong with that reasoning.
But what I noticed that people will say, those religious, is saying God works in mysterious ways, and everything that happens in life happens for a reason.
Let's address this issue later, and start by asking, does free will really exist? Whether or not free will truly exists, you can't deny the fact that we all have the ability to make decisions and choose our actions. For example, I can choose to hold my hand like this or like this. My experience of having free will is undeniable. But the problem here is mere experience doesn't necessarily prove anything. Why not? Because experiences can be misleading, like when you watch the sun set. As you know, the sun doesn't really travel downwards through the sky. It's the horizon that moves upwards as the Earth turns on its axis. The sun's motion is an illusion. So your experience of watching the sun go down doesn't prove that it moves. So too, your experience of free will doesn't prove its existence. Free will might be as illusory as the motion of the sun. That's exactly what many philosophers teach in a theory they call determinism. Determinism simply says that every event is determined by a cause that precedes it.
This is the one thing. So I was going to explain this. I was going to wait till the end, but yeah, this is the one thing that I've heard. Is because everything you, like him saying, "Oh, I can put my hand like this or like this," that was all determined because of the questions and how he answers the questions and what his experiences in life and how people explain it to him and how he's experienced of way of explaining things. It's very interesting. Let's see what he has to say.
It's
more.
basically the law of cause and
Yes.
effect.
Well,
Physical events are determined by physical causes, like rain that's caused by moisture in the air. Similarly, mental events are determined by mental causes. Mentally adding 2 plus 2 causes a particular event in your mind, the number 4. Now, consider this. Decisions are also mental events. They arise in your mind like the number 4. And as mental events, they must be preceded by a cause. So, your decision to watch this video was not due to free will. It was determined by some kind of mental predisposition to watch it, according to those philosophers.
I was thinking about this last night. I was like, I was thinking in my head how to kind of explain it. So basically, the way I know you do not have free will is because whenever I say monkey, did you just think of a monkey? I made you think of monkey. That's and basically, how's that? And you didn't freely think of it; it automatically happened. I don't know if that. I was thinking about monkey though, about an explanation for it. But yeah, and that's a reactionary. That's a survival thing. I don't know why though. Like, why would when someone says something, your brain automatically tries to conjure? I guess your brain is trying to constantly understand the world that's going on. What people say, what you experience through how you experience through your sensory organs. Your brain is constantly just figuring everything out. It's always busy.
You might disagree with them, saying, I wasn't aware of any mental predispositions before I chose to watch this video. In response, those philosophers would point out that pre-existing causes can't always be observed. For instance, you can't see the moisture in the air that causes rain. So too, you need not be aware of mental predispositions that determine your choices in life. Based on this, your choice of career, spouse, and the kind of car you drive could indeed be determined by unobserved mental predispositions and not by free will.
That's pretty interesting whenever he gave that example of the car and say your wife. By observing cars, you start liking certain things, not because she said, oh, I like that. No, there's a certain kind of effect, like favorite color. What made you determine blue as your favorite color, or red, or green, or whatever color it happens to be? It's not like you said, all right, what's my favorite color today? Yellow. That's my favorite color. No, it's kind of really weird, and it can change a little bit, but and then your wife, like this kind of societal to some degree, and but also, I wonder if that's purely societal though now. Probably not completely societal, but I think obviously there are social things that are kind of implanted in your head, but that's not completely all of your decision-making skills. There's something innate in you that you don't necessarily control, but you have this liking towards it.
Modern neuroscience supports this philosophical theory. Scientists have identified specific neural activities in the brain associated with making a choice. And they've detected the presence of those neural activities as much as half a second before a person consciously chooses something. So, according to neuroscience, your brain makes a choice, and then a moment later, you become aware of that choice. To illustrate this, it's my brain that decides to move my hand like this. And when I become aware of that a moment later, I misinterpret my experience as being free will. If that's true, then how free are the choices I make? The problem with neuroscience and its experiments is the fact that we humans are much more than the neurons and synapses that make up our enormously complex brains. After all, we're not biological robots. We are conscious beings.
I do wonder that. I do wonder that. We're just organic robots. I mean, when robotics gets far enough to where I don't have the thing, but anyways, where memory cards used to be so thick and big to hold so much storage. Now you can have something so tiny hold 1 terabyte actually now. 1 terabyte, that big. Imagine having so many SD cards, it could hold more memory that we can, and how our brain works. How we work in some sense is the fact that we get input, and then from those inputs we determine whether it's good or bad. Touching fire, burning, pain, bad. But there are kids out there who don't feel pain receptors, so they touch fire. They don't know it's a bad thing because they don't feel pain until someone tells them that's a bad thing because they're damaging their skin. So, and then what is it? Food, taste. When you eat stuff, you're like, oh my gosh, broccoli's nasty. So you don't want to eat broccoli. Now, further down the line, you're like, oh, I don't want broccoli in my food, or I don't want greens. Some people don't like greens, vegetables, or don't like meat, or don't like fruits, or don't like rice, or whatever, or bread, carbohydrates. But yeah, and then as you get those inputs, you start to develop this pattern. And there are people out there who are very pattern-based, you could say. My life is kind of a pattern. I'm pretty predictable. I'm basically most of the days you can tell where I'm going to be at, basically, and what I basically eat on a daily basis, etc., etc. I'm very predictable for the most part. And robots can be like that, where if you program certain things to say, do this, do that, do this, and eventually robots are going to be smart enough to be able to learn what to do and what not to do. So eating all that too. I mean, you're looking at what is it? I forget. Cars. Basically, you say electronic cars, where you plug it in and say, I'm going to leave at 8 in the morning. And what your car does is says, okay, you're going to leave 8 in the morning. I'm not going to charge until 5 in the morning. And I'll give us 3 hours to charge the battery to full. So you don't keep it fully charged over a longer period of time. That's bad for the battery. So the car is smart enough to know to charge at 5 in the morning, and by the time it comes 8 in the morning, it's fully charged and you're ready to go. That's just some very simple basic stuff. But I'm wondering if we are literally biological robots.
The consciousness we possess makes us unique, different from all other objects of scientific research. Scientists have no instruments that can detect or measure our consciousness. And, in spite of their tremendous efforts, scientists can't even explain how consciousness arises in the brain. Scientists admit that the nature of consciousness has not been fully understood. It remains a mystery. But without understanding consciousness, it's impossible to properly explain human experience, including the experience of free will.
Now, I'll say this. Again, back in the day, scientists didn't know how rain works, thunderstorms, how plants grew, how a lot of things worked in the world. It took time for scientists at the time to discover these things. Usually it's always explained, God did that, that's raining because you made God mad. And it's not raining because you made God mad. It's God mad because it's raining, God mad because it's not raining. When you're in a drought. So a lot of it is just thrown off to God and God and God as a way to understand the world, to explain the world so people can understand it. But as science develops and get a better and better equipment, it's capable of understanding a lot of things. Maybe it's just a matter of time.
So, current scientific findings about free will cannot be considered conclusive. What's more, the field of science observes and studies worldly objects, like our brains, neurons, and synapses. But science can't directly observe your personal experience, your thoughts and emotions. These can be observed only by you. And here lies a major difference between science and spirituality. Science studies the outer world, whereas spirituality studies your inner world, the world of experience.
I can agree with that absolutely, and I've said that too. Science so far has been just about external stuff, and that is mostly the Western world, and the Western world is severely lacking inner world stuff. Desperately needed in the Western world, and most of the world, honestly, really. But the Western world's got the outer world semi-figured out, but its outer world knowledge is significantly, vastly more improved than its inner world, which is not a good thing, causing a lot of problems if you don't know about your inner world.
Scientific instruments can measure the activities of your brain, but they have no access whatsoever to your thoughts and emotions, and to your consciousness. The sages of ancient India offered a very different explanation of free will in the scriptures on which the teachings of Vedanta are based. Very briefly, Vedanta says that pure consciousness is your essential nature, your true inner self, called Atma. That consciousness has no free will of its own. It simply reveals all the thoughts and emotions in your mind, like the sun reveals all the activities on Earth.
Okay, I would have never guessed that. I would have figured you do. I would have figured he would have said you had free will, because you are consciousness and don't. You are the consciousness, and everything that you experience is in the consciousness. That's what I would have figured. I think he would have said, or at the very least, you have free will. But he's saying you don't. Okay, that's a twist.
The sun doesn't do anything; it just shines. So too, the conscious self, Atma, doesn't really do anything. It just illumines the activities of your mind. When your mind is illumined by that consciousness, it produces all the thoughts, emotions, and sensations that you experience each day, including the experience of free will. So, according to the sages, free will is a mental faculty, like your ability to think logically or be empathetic towards others. Also, free will happens to be central to the doctrine of karma, a teaching that Hindus, Buddhists, and many others accept. Karma literally means deed or action. But according to the doctrine of karma, that deed or action must be deliberate. It must be produced by free will. Some actions don't require free will. Involuntary actions like hiccups or the reflex movement of your limbs. But these actions are not considered karma. Only deliberate, willful actions are capable of producing karmic results. So, without free will, there's no such thing as karma.
Okay, this is going back to my original confusion back with Who Am I with Swami Sarvapriyananda about everything being or everything being Brahman, but yet it's Maya. Let me reposition here. So basically, again, I don't know how he's interpreting the world, but if everything is pure consciousness, the world is pure consciousness. Everything's Brahman. If everything's Brahman, pure consciousness, Atman, etc., then there is no such thing as free will. If, according to the Vedantic views, that there is no free will in the Atman, and Atman being Brahman, and everything being Brahman, then there is no free will. Much like there's no karma, which I've said before and someone answered, in reality there is no karma because everything's Brahman. But at the same time, I can't remember who said this, which kind of cleared it up a little bit. I think it's Swami Sarvapriyananda, where karmic action continues to flow in the world. Like your body is, karmic actions is bound to the objective reality world. And once you come to realization, you are no longer bound by your karmic actions. You're not bound by your karma anymore, even though the body still continues to have karma, but you as the Atman, when you come full realization, are no longer bound by that. You are free, you're liberated from your karmic actions. Oh man, I need to write this out and try to pose these questions to Swami Sarvapriyananda and Tadatmananda here, because if everything is Brahman and karma is Brahman, then there's no free will. If, according to the Vedantic views, that the Atman has no free will, but the body has free will. Man, every time I learn something new, I get confused a bit. I still understand my old understandings, but these new things kind of throw a wrench in it a little bit.
Now that we've discussed the existence of free will, we can turn to the second part of Sridhar's question, about God's will.
Okay.
It says in the Bible, "Not a leaf stirs without the will of God." Hindus have a similar view. But the very nature of what we call God's will is rarely understood properly. Look at this. You possess a specifically human type of free will.
Okay.
You wake up in the morning and decide what you'll do. But God is not a human being and doesn't have a human type of free will. The idea that God is a supremely powerful being in heaven who can intercede on your behalf is the basis for many prayers. But unfortunately, that notion makes God seem like an influential relative of yours who works for the government and can intercede on your behalf. We need a more mature way of understanding God's will. According to Vedanta, God's will is the cosmic intelligence that pervades the universe and governs it, making order out of chaos. In this way, the laws of nature are a manifestation of God's will. It's God's will that objects fall down when dropped. It's God's will that the earth orbits the sun. And it's God's will that the wind blows and stirs the leaves of every tree. Your will and God's will couldn't be more different. Human will is fickle. You can change your mind at any moment. But what would happen if God's will was fickle? A dropped object might fall upwards or sideways, depending on God's mood at that moment. Clearly, God's will is utterly unlike human will. Now, we can respond to Sridhar's suggestion that we're like puppets since everything happens according to God's will. According to God's intelligence, manifest as the laws of nature, your mind is endowed with the faculty of free will. And since God's will isn't fickle, God won't prevent you from using your free will to commit harmful or immoral deeds. If God interfered with your choices, your will wouldn't truly be free. So, if I were to commit a terrible crime, it's my fault because I chose to use my God-given free will to do something horribly wrong. It's important to recognize that your free will is not absolutely free. It has limits.
Okay.
Humans are not almighty like God, so your free will is not invincible. It gets subjugated or overridden whenever intense emotions or desires seize control of
okay.
your behavior. For instance, if you shout at someone in anger, you don't consciously choose to shout. At that moment, your free will gets temporarily overpowered by anger. But when emotions overpower your free will, who's really in control? You or your emotions?
Let's say you.
This problem was poignantly expressed in the great epic Mahabharata, when the evil-minded Prince Duryodhana said, Janami dharmam na cha me pravrittihi. I know what is dharma, righteousness, but I'm not inclined to follow it. Janamya dharmam na cha me nivrittihi. I know what is adharma, wickedness, but I can't restrain myself from doing it. Your free will is completely free only when it's no longer subject to being overpowered by intense emotions and desires. Many spiritual practices, including meditation, can help you learn how to manage your emotions and break free from the grip of desires. By using your free will to live a life of dharma, you can become more self-controlled, more emotionally and spiritually mature, and eventually you can approach life's highest goal, enlightenment.
And that I completely agree with them too. Again, that's what I'm saying. In the Western world, there's so much almost the masters of external stuff. But the problem is internally we are so immature. Luckily enough, I'm not completely immature internally, and I think again I keep pointing back to this one major thing in my life, which is my world religions class. It was an Indian lady teacher, and talked about Buddhism, about the world is suffering. It's pure suffering. That alone, that one sentence, completely changed how I think about the world. And also another thing that also stuck with me too is the fact that whatever you do, give 110%, but expect nothing from it. So that if it does in fact turn out good, that's great. But if it turns out terrible, not the way that you want it, then you expected nothing from it, so it doesn't affect you. And those two phrases, mostly that the world is suffering, that I started to think like a way of separating my emotions. So luckily enough, I've had a kind of head start in trying to separate myself from my emotions. It's not 100%. There's still things that gets to me, but for the most part, I am not, how do I say, a slave to my emotions. For the most part, it doesn't get to me. I am above a lot of my emotions, and I can understand where certain things should anger me, and I can feel it, but I am in control of it. Now, that was one of the three. I think that was is that bhakti? Karma, sure. Physical actions and thoughts. Bhakti is your devotion. Jnana is your knowledge. I've always associated physical actions, emotion, and thoughts. And emotion being able to see your emotions, control your emotions, versus karma, your actions, physical actions. I never thought of thoughts. I always thought of thoughts as jnana, your knowledge, your thoughts of knowledge too.
This is the third in a series of videos that answers questions submitted by viewers. If you have a question that would serve as a good topic for a video like this one, please email me at this address, and be sure to indicate video question as the subject of the email. I'll try to address your question in a future video.
Okay, so hey, if you ask this person a question, please let me know in the comments, and I would love to see if he answers your questions, just to see how he answered. I definitely need to ask these people a question. I'm still trying to figure out, again, between if this one brings up another issue with how Brahman, Maya, your karmic actions, or your karma, because again, the sheer fact that everything's Brahman kind of in my opinion, in how I understand it, destroys basically everything. Karma, free will. Well, free will now because of what he said. And well, Maya mostly, because if everything is Brahman, then Maya doesn't make sense unless it's defined the way I define it, which Maya being just a misunderstanding, not necessarily an illusion, just a misunderstanding. Well, anyways, I've talked way too much in this video, so that's the end of this video. That's my reaction to does free will really exist? If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.